Whispers in the dark. In the town of Grimsford, the fog wasn't just a weather condition, it was a warning. Especially on the 13th of November, when the fog grew thick and heavy, curling around the streets and homes like a living thing. This night was known as the Night of Whispers, a night when the fog carried voices from the past, and those who dared to listen too closely would hear their own name. Amelia Winters had left Grimsford years ago, desperate to escape its suffocating gloom. But when her mother passed away, she was pulled back to the town she had long tried to forget. The house she had grown up in, a crumbling Victorian at the edge of town, was now hers. She returned reluctantly, memories of her childhood fears creeping into her mind as she approached the house. The fog was already thick when she arrived, slithering through the trees and pressing against the windows. The air inside the house was cold and stale, and Amelia could almost feel her mother's presence in the darkened halls. She hadn't been back since she was a teenager, and yet everything felt eerily familiar. As night fell, the whispers began. At first, they were faint, barely audible over the creaks and groans of the old house. Amelia tried to ignore them, convincing herself it was just the wind playing tricks on her. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until she couldn't block them out. Amelia. Her name echoed through the house, carried by voices she couldn't place. They were calling to her, beckoning her to follow. She turned on the radio in an attempt to drown out the sound, but the whispers seeped through, filling the room with their eerie melody. Amelia. The voices were everywhere, surrounding her, filling her mind with fear. She could feel them pressing in on her, urging her to listen. Desperate to escape, Amelia grabbed a flashlight and ran to the front door, but it wouldn't open. The key was missing, and the door was locked tight. Panic set in as she raced through the house, trying every window, every exit, but they were all sealed shut. The whispers followed her, growing louder, more frantic. She was trapped. In a moment of desperation, she remembered the old storm cellar in the basement. It was her last hope. She rushed down the stairs, the air growing colder with each step. The whispers followed her down, growing louder and more menacing. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, she found the storm cellar door, but it was locked from the outside. She was trapped in the dark, with only the whispers for company. The basement was freezing, and her breath hung in the air in frosty puffs. The voices surrounded her, echoing off the stone walls. Amelia. The voice was closer now, almost as if it was right beside her. She swung the flashlight around, but there was nothing there. Just shadows and dust. But she could feel something unseen, something watching her. And then she saw it, a figure, barely visible in the dim light, standing at the far end of the basement. It was tall and thin, its features obscured by the fog that seemed to have seeped into the very walls of the house. Its eyes were cold, empty, and hungry. Amelia backed away, her heart racing, but the figure moved closer, its steps slow and deliberate. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices urging her to run, to hide, to escape. But there was nowhere to go. She turned and raced back up the stairs, the figure close behind. She could hear its ragged breathing, feel its presence just inches away. She slammed the basement door shut and locked it, her hands trembling. For a moment, there was silence. She leaned against the door, trying to catch her breath, but then she heard it, a soft tapping on the other side of the door. It was a sound that sent a wave of terror through her, a sound she had heard before. As a child, Amelia had always been afraid of the basement. Her mother had told her stories of the whispers in the dark, warning her never to go down there alone. She had always thought it was just a way to keep her out of trouble, but now she realized that her mother had been trying to protect her from something far worse. The tapping continued, growing louder and more insistent. And then, the door began to rattle, as if something, or someone, was trying to force its way through. Amelia backed away, her mind racing. She needed to find a way out, but every exit was blocked, every window sealed. In a moment of desperation, she remembered the old attic ladder, hidden away in the closet upstairs. It was a long shot, but it was the only option she had left. She sprinted up the stairs, her feet pounding against the wooden steps as she heard the basement door crash open behind her. She reached the closet, yanking the door open and pulling down the ladder. She scrambled up, pulling it closed behind her just as she heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. She was trapped in the attic now, with no way out, but at least she had bought herself a few more moments. The attic was dark and musty, filled with old boxes and forgotten memories. Amelia huddled in a corner, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. The whispers were all around her now, echoing through the rafters, growing louder and louder until they were almost deafening. And then, everything went silent. Slowly, she looked up, and there, hanging from the rafters, was a figure, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that stared down at her. It was the same figure from the basement, only now, it was closer, much closer. Amelia never left the house again. When the townspeople finally broke their silence the next morning, they found the house empty, the doors unlocked, and the fog lifting. But Amelia was gone, swallowed by the whispers in the dark, and every year, on the 13th of November, the whispers would return, calling out to anyone foolish enough to listen.